All right, welcome back to the Canadian Gun Vault. Behind the vault door, I'm your host, Mark Morelli, and I'm a gun owner, and I really don't care who knows it. It's one of those security things that people that own firearms always have to consider. And certainly if you're going to make the announcement, successfully to your friends, definitely make them aware that, you exercise the necessary precautions to make it possible to secure your firearms and make sure that nobody takes them. Security has always been an issue for the firearm community. And as a result, this secrecy that we are forced to engage in to make ourselves feel a little bit safer, that nobody will try and break into your house and steal your guns, has kind of forced us into the underground. And it's certainly left, 80% of the Canadian population wondering, what we might be up to. There's people out there with guns, and then they don't really tell them much. So, I created the Canadian Gun Vault because I wanted to give people an opportunity to, kind of get exposed to the firearm community and to see them in action and to see the things that we love, and rather than being shrouded in this air of mystery, where the anti-gunners can kind of really play with people's fears. Instead of doing that, which historically hasn't worked for us very well in the past, this whole let's hide somewhere and hope they don't come get us attitude, that's so very pervasive in the firearm community. We've had our rights stomped on so many times. You got a lot of people that are gun shy, for lack of a better term, and are more than willing to kind of like hide out and not draw attention to themselves, which I think is completely the wrong move. As a police officer for years, they used to take me into the annual use of force training classes. They'd run through these scenarios, and inevitably, I was guilty of stepping into people, really quickly as a police officer when I made the determination that I was going to have to grab somebody, or if I was in a situation with a hostile person, I would try negotiation, and I got better with tactical communication as I matured as an officer. But I still, even in my final years of policing, I still was pretty aggressive. I would step in pretty quick. And, that whole time and distance of your friends didn't seem to really, compute with me as kind of an aggressive Italian male with probably, a slightly overabundance of testosterone. Having the Morelli name kind of made me a little bit more aggressive, and I wasn't afraid of contact. I played football and, poke high, 4 touchdowns, 1 game kind of situation, I was raised, to be tough and to kind of push yourself physically. And so I would, step into people really quick, and I was always criticized for that, and I'm just trying to think of, where I'm going with this. Hey. Hmm? Are you listening at all?
Yeah, I am listening.
Where I lost my train of thought there for a second. I got off onto a tangent.
I know.
I don't know. I suddenly began to talk about high school football. I don't know how I arrived at that location, but going on, I don't think a lot of people out there realize how difficult it is to kind of run a podcast by yourself and sort of engage in a monologue. When you're not really interviewing people, you sometimes rely very heavily on the interaction of others to kind of carry a conversation. I don't seem to have any difficulty doing it on my own once I feel comfortable. And I've had a bit of discomfort, and there's been a bit of a learning curve. I haven't done a lot of talking. Certainly, I find myself not always in a position where I feel like I want to share off the last couple of years I've had before I started the Canadian Gun Vault. But now, I'm sitting here, with a microphone, trying to think of things to say that people might find entertaining. And at the same time, I think it's important to kind of convey this message. The Canadian gun owners have really, time and again, had their rights stomped on. And so, with that in mind, if you've got this group that's already, feeling like they've been singled out, and I mean, running completely contrary to what everything that they teach today is that, you shouldn't single out one group. You can't blame everybody because one person does something. I mean, there's this world of excuses and complete ignorance, to the facts that, the Canadian legal firearm community, like the people that actually get trained, get licensing, they're government approved, they're vetted, they're cleared. There's references. You got to talk to ex-girlfriends. I mean, like you got to be just shy of a living saint and to own firearms legitimately in this country. And yet every time we turn around, somebody in office is passing a new law, it seems, that only targets us. And meanwhile, like the very reason people are claiming to be scared of us, these people that are terrified of guns, and they're terrified of violent crime, and so am I, but not around legal gun owners. Like that's one of those things that I found myself just blown away by. Is you've got this group of fantastic people that have absolutely no interest in breaking the law, and everything they generate seems to target this group. Okay, which quite frankly, because they obey the law, they're just easy targets. I mean, like, what are your options really? We're banning that. You can't have it. Like, turn it in for destruction. Well, no, I don't want to. Would be the answer of anybody else if it was anything other than a gun. And so you've, got this group of people that are kind of forced into a position where they actually become the thing that people are afraid of if they decide that they're not going to do what the government tells them, which is completely wrong. If I showed up at your door tomorrow, as a regular Joe citizen, in my house, I'm eating breakfast, I'm trying to, get up and be on my way to work, I'm trying to pay the bills, I got a wife that's angry at me, and, there's a knock at my door, and somebody says, hi, we're from the government, your car is blue, it's sitting in the driveway, and we're going to seize it. We're not going to compensate you for it. We're not going to give you any money for it. Sorry about that. We know you paid for it. We know you worked for it and bought it. And, that, hey, you worked real hard for that. I mean, I could see that, you're having a hard time making ends meet. But, you paid for it. So, you got, let's just say it's a nice one. It's a, like a Mustang. Like you worked hard for it. And, it's taken a lot of man hours to get that car. You're quite proud of it. You spend a lot of time with it. You drive it, you enjoy it, you find something in it that you really delivers a relaxation, in your life. Like you enjoy driving the car. You bought yourself a car because you wanted that car, you love that car, you're going to, wax and wash that car, and you're going to drive that car. And one day the government shows up at your door and says, by the way, you're not allowed to have that. Okay. Like, now what? Like, you're not taking it. Yeah, we're taking it. Well, how are you going to take my car? Right? Like, I mean, I bought my car. That's my car. No, it's not. By the way, we told you that, it's written right in there, in the charter. It's really not your property anyway. So, okay, so who did the work for it then? Like, I mean, who owns it? Like, I mean, last time I checked, my name was on the slip. No. The Queen owns it. All right, the Queen. Okay, well, thank you. I've never met the Queen, so I'm going to argue that, she doesn't own my car. Right? Nope, she owns your car because you don't have any real rights to it. I mean, you're that guy. You're standing in your doorway and you're going, like, there's no way. So you're going to take my car and I'm not allowed to use it. Well, hold on. We're going to look at it. We're going to determine whether or not you might be able to keep it. Chances are you won't. Okay. That one, nope. That one you won't. That one's okay. This one, okay. No, you know what? Well, hold on. Let's look at the list. Nope. Sorry. I'm not allowed to own that one either. Right. Well, you're kind of, you're screwed. I think it's fascinating that anybody in their right mind would think it's okay for the government to walk into your life, take your property, and not offer you any kind of compensation. And or they'll sit there and they'll look at a long list of your property and determine whether or not you're allowed to keep it, not keep it. You can keep it, but it can never, go out the door again. So you got to keep that there. Like, to be a gun owner in this country really puts you in a position where you're subject to, some pretty harsh regulation already. Like, arguably, Canada has some of the tightest restrictions in the world. And so here you are operating in this environment where you have to be perfect, and we have very tight regulations, and the government every once in a while likes to swoop in and say you can't have that. It doesn't matter if you've owned it for decades, and it doesn't matter if it's never been used for anything other than punching holes in paper, and you've enjoyed it and you worked hard for it. Forget all that. You're just not allowed to have it, and there's really no good reason for it. And nobody seems to understand, other than gun owners, that you can have, your property taken from you at any time. So, I mean, you really can only go one of a couple of routes here. I think, changing the law would be the best way to go. There's a lot of opportunity and some great places they can make some revision in the law that would certainly streamline, the system, and, definitely close some, vague, ambiguous terms that are in it. But instead we're going to trust a government that doesn't seem to be making any good decisions at all lately. We've got a leader that arguably has never been under more scrutiny than this one is now. A lot of unhappy people, but they're gonna take a group, an advisory committee, a bunch of people that really know very little or nothing about guns or hate guns, right? They're going to take this group, that consists almost entirely of people that dislike the very thing that they're about to regulate. The last time we put together a group like this, it ended costing the country billions of dollars in a registry that was scrapped. If we put people in charge that know absolutely nothing about firearms and or totally hate firearms, we're going to have some very unhappy groups of people that are going to be, I'm sure, disgusted with the amount of money that's spent, the ineffective nature of whatever they come up with. How about, it's just not going to be fair. The process won't be fair. And that's not Canadian. And I really have a problem with that. So my thinking is that we actually hold them accountable for this and say, look, if you're going to create a committee, you're going to make one that is completely objective and without bias to generate these laws, rather than putting together, right, the dream team of anti-gunners and a couple of token players thrown in the mix who arguably, may just go along with it. Who knows? I'm going to say that if you stack that deck that high, that we should try as gun owners to knock it over. Right? I think that means that everybody needs to write into their member of parliament. We need to write into Ralph Goodale's office. And you could sit there and you could say, well, writing doesn't do anything. I say if everybody does their bit, that we're going to get something done. We start with letters. All right. If you're unhappy with the idea of being punished for the crimes of others, write that down on a piece of paper, right, and send it into Ralph Goodale's office, right? The Office of Emergency Preparedness. Right, because we're preparing for an emergency. They're about to waste, right, probably millions of dollars, right, just to create legislation that will only be scrapped in the future, because I can't imagine a world where the Liberal government is reelected in 2019. I hope to God it doesn't happen, because we as gun owners had better take this seriously. If they get a second term, we're going to be in for the fight of our lives. We're in it now. If you don't think we are, you're mistaken. If this current government isn't defeated at the election booths in 2019, it is going to be catastrophic for this country. And it's not just guns, right? It just seems like money's going out the door and nobody seems to know why it's going there. And we're not questioning the correct people when it comes to breaches of ethical conduct. I think it's really important, right, that we support good people in Parliament, like Michelle Rempel, right, who finds herself, I'm sure, at odds on multiple levels with this current government. I don't know. I watch her in parliamentary session, and I see a very passionate woman that wants to fight for Canadian pride, because we've lost quite a bit of it. I think it's really important that we get back into the fight. As gun owners, as patriotic Canadians, I'm not encouraging a armed uprising. But I do suggest is that you pick up the pen and actually write a letter. Write a letter. Take the time it takes to write a letter. I know you all got busy days. I got busy days too. But I'm going to put my pen on that paper and I'm going to set aside, an hour to just say that this is enough. We've got a group that needs to be disbanded. There's no way they're going to be fair, and since this is Canada, why we're going to insist on some fairness. So if everybody picks up their pens and gets them to paper and writes 2 letters, one right to their member of parliament, reminding them that we vote them into office and that you're not happy with any support given to any kind of legislation that moves forward on the Canadian firearm community with this group at the helm. There's absolutely no way. That group has to be disbanded. So if everybody writes into their member of parliament and into Ralph Goodale's office, I think that we should express what it is that we're concerned about, and I think that that's fair, and I think that they should respond to everybody with something more than a automated response. And I mean, that means we should be comparing notes. If they're going to send every one of us back this rubber stamped, right, bullshit automated response, right? Everybody gets the same one, right? They pretend like they sign it, whether they do or don't, I don't know. But I can tell you right now that insisting that they actually respond to us, with a letter that isn't mass-produced, saying the same thing, that we're going to be working in partnership with the hunting community and the firearm community, and, to come up with fair legislation that's good for everybody. I mean, I remember reading that letter in the 90s. That said, as a celebration of legitimate firearm ownership in this country and the strong, history connected to it, we only ask that you register these guns. And then they banned them 18 months later. And, that giant betrayal that occurred back then is not something that one easily forgets if you live through it. So I think it's really important that we all take the time to write our member of parliament, write Ralph Goodale's office. I can almost barely get through that without laughing a little bit, because I really don't want to cause a lot of problems for Ralph. Ralph's toeing the line. But the truth is that Ralph needs to smarten up if he's going to support things like this, because, it has nothing to do with safety, and everybody knows it. And it's about time we start to call them out on it. Anyway, that's about all the time I have tonight for this week's podcast, the Canadian Gun Vault Behind the Vault Door. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you all have had a great and safe weekend. Have a good night, folks.